This is how to protect your income. I'm a pandemic rideshare baby. I wish I could go back in time to how I was working in the pandemic. I would have made a lot more money. I find that drivers don't know how to pick rides. If there's no standard mile deduction, then the government can make more money off of taxes. And that's where rideshare drivers really make their money. It's misleading to say he only took home $14,000, but there's a lot of misconception here and I want to clear it up. There's a Business Insider article where a driver made over $110,000 from Uber and Lyft in 2022, but took home only $14,000 after 6 years on the job. He's working towards a degree in a new career. I'm going to use this guy as an example, how we as rideshare drivers should protect ourselves from the mistakes that he makes in this video. But I want to be clear that despite the fact that I'm honing in on some of one, there's some misconceptions in here that Business Insider is just not aware of that I'm going to bring to light. And two, there are things that this guy did that he could have done better. He could have protected himself. But I am not saying in any way, shape, or form that this absolves Lyft and Uber of how they take advantage of drivers. Michael, a ride-hailing driver in his late 30s, made more than $110,000 in gross earnings driving for Uber and Lyft in 2022. But after commissions paid for the ride-hailing companies, taxes, and other expenses, he ended up with a net earnings of just $14,000. That sounds horrible, but there's way more to it. Michael, who's based in New Jersey and asked us to use only his first name in fear of professional repercussions, shared tax documents and screenshots of rides that disclose just how little he took home in 2022. Expenses included buying a new engine, having numerous car repairs, and driving amid elevated gas prices. He said he noticed ride-hailing driving had become increasingly less profitable after more than 17,000 rides across 6 years. Now, he's 100% right about that. They made more money back in the day than they make now. I started during the pandemic, and I recently had a conversation with someone who's been driving before the pandemic. And he said, like, what we're seeing now with the slowdown is very reminiscent of how it was before the pandemic. So I'm a pandemic rideshare baby, and my perception, we came in at a good time. Drivers stopped driving, and that, the government was giving out free money. If the government gives out free money, less people work. This is how it happened. And he said, like, what we're experiencing now is how it has been in the past, and we're just getting caught back up to it. When Uber and Lyft first launched, they were paying significantly better. So any driver who's been driving for a while, they can attest to the fact that yes, in the past it was better and it is now getting worse. That's something I want you to keep in mind. Even though I come on here and try to get you guys to make more money, keep in mind that pay is decreasing over time. So put that into your long-term financial plan. As a driver with a spinal injury who takes care of 2 young kids, he said he'd struggled to make ends meet for himself and his family. He's soon set to enroll in a bachelor's degree program funded entirely by Uber, but in the meantime, driving is one of his only options to pull in cash. I'm actually thinking about doing that program to finish my computer science degree. I think that school is good. If it's free, it's best. If you use debt, don't do it. At the end of the year, we incur every single cost from wear and tear to mechanical, cell phones, oil changes, gas, which is our biggest expense. We're now getting less pay. Gas is the biggest expense, and depending on the kind of car you get, it's bigger than your car payment. Again, depends on the kind of car you get. Americans with disabilities are increasingly looking to gig work, particularly ride-hailing, driving, to pay their bills and to find work schedules that fit their needs. As many Americans with disabilities are unable to work 9-to-5 jobs, gig work has appealed to those who need the flexibility to craft their own hours. But for drivers such as Michael, gig work is unsustainable given all the associated costs that go into ride-hailing driving and the lack of benefits. Michael started driving for ride-hailing companies in 2017 after being a delivery driver for Domino's, which he said wasn't paying the bills. He estimated that at the time he received 60 to 70% of what the passenger paid, and it was relatively stable as it was one of his first jobs since getting a work permit as an immigrant. Estimated that time he received 60 to 70%. Okay, when Uber, I know Uber used to have a 20-80% split where the driver would get 80%, Uber would take 20. So this, probably by the time he joined in, they probably flexed it a little bit. So that looks to be accurate. That would be nice in today's market. If we got 60 to 70%, that would be fantastic. I was in an extreme financial situation and the convenience of driving was perfect because I had a newborn. I didn't have a green card. I was limited in my choice of employment and my wife wasn't working. So he was probably using someone else's account because how else the rules could have been different back then. He might have had a license that wasn't from America and they might have accepted that. Very unlikely. It's more likely he was using someone else's account, but okay. He switched to Uber full-time shortly after, driving in the nighttime as rides were most profitable and competition was sparse, which is still true today. He drove 40 to 50 hours a week and sometimes as many as 80, and he was able to attend doctor appointments and take time off when in pain. Okay, so I thought he got injured on the job. We'll see. You'll see why I thought that. He also said driving early in the pandemic was profitable as few drivers were on the road, which allowed him to make $1,800 to $2,200 a week fairly consistently. I wish I could go back in time with the knowledge I have now of strategy during the pandemic and apply that strategy to how I was working in the pandemic. I would have made a lot more money. But after a serious car crash, he was out of work for a few months and continued to see doctors regularly for the next 3 years. He didn't have health insurance, so much of his earnings went to medical costs. Okay, this is actually perfect. This is perfect. If you don't have health insurance and rideshare is your like main income driver, I want you to go and watch a video that I just made. Today's the last day, right? The last day. Oh, look at this. I'm not even. I can't. I'm just gonna go to my channel. Money Talk with Tristan Thomas. Okay, right. This is my premium. This is real. I logged into my Better, and I pay $28 a month for insurance. This whole video, I break down what I get for that. I even walk through how you can sign up for your own like insurance. If you don't have insurance, please get it. Most of my videos talk about how to increase your income. This is how to protect your income. If you're married, if you got kids, you might have to pay a little more, but having insurance is how you protect your income. Like I found out I had diabetes last year. I might not have it anymore just because, you know, I've worked on it. Diabetes type 2 is something that can actually go away with proper diet and exercise, but I wouldn't have found out. I just went for a routine check because I had insurance. My glasses paid for by insurance. My ADHD that I didn't realize I had until very recently, my medication, my psychiatrist, all paid by insurance. Like today you're fine, tomorrow you might not be. And today's the last day to get insurance for the rest of the year until November. So like, it's very important. It's one of the benefits. And he should have had insurance, right? He said he had a green card at the time. I assume eventually he got a citizenship because I don't understand how he's still working for Uber and Lyft. And I also don't know if non-citizens can get insurance through the government insurance program. I don't know how that works, but if you are able to, just get it. Even if you have a high deductible, even if your deductible is like 5,000, shoot, even if it's 10,000, if you get into an accident, it's going to be like $100,000 bill, or you get cancer, or anything like that. This is how you protect your finances. And I think you guys should at least look at it. Mistake number one that this guy made, he didn't have insurance. A year later, he got into another car crash that damaged his vehicle, which amounted to more bills from auto repairs and a car rental. Money was tight, he said, but he got through it. He took time off from March 2020 to September 2020 to care for his young kids, and then had a spinal fusion that put him out for 2 months. Sounds like he was just using the stimulus money checks, which is fine. You know, he's having a rough time, accident. I probably would have at least, I guess the kids were out of school. Yeah, okay, there's a lot there. I'm not gonna go too deep on that because there's a lot that I just don't know. And you know, whatever. The world was a weird place back then. He said he noticed over the past few years that he'd been making less and less per ride amid changes to ride-hailing companies' pricing models, shifts in surge pricing, and the adoption of upfront pricing. I think upfront pricing lowered driver pay for two reasons, right? It got rid of the rate card, which was Uber and Lyft really taking advantage of us. And then two, I find that drivers don't know how to pick rides. They don't do it consistently. I'll see other YouTube drivers, they'll show, you know, their screen and they'll decline a ride that makes like, you know, a good amount per mile, and then they'll accept a ride that makes worse. And I just feel like upfront pay is doing it, like people just aren't doing a great job of deciding what's a good ride and what isn't a good ride. He said that pre-pandemic, he would make $15,000 to $2,000 a week before gas and taxes, but he was now pulling in about $1,000 to $1,100 a week. I wonder where he works. He added that the saturation of drivers in his market in New Jersey, he did say that. New Jersey can be hit or miss. Sometimes they have good weeks, sometimes they don't. And New Jersey drivers can't necessarily drive in New York City. They can't even always drive in Pennsylvania. It's weird. Like it's very like clustered together, and it will suck if you have to drop someone off and then deadhead back, and then that's happening all day. So I get it. There's some challenges there, but New Jersey does have the lowest gas price in the Northeast. He said he also noticed fewer promotions, which in the past meant frequent bonuses for completing a certain number of rides in the area over the past year. That's fair. Every day you have to come up with a different plan with regard to where you will work and on what schedule that will make you money. That's becoming more and more true. And as that becomes more and more true, the drivers who are resistant to that are going to continue making less and less money. And the drivers who are accepting of that are going to maintain their money. I'm not going to say make more and more money, but you'll put in more effort to maintain similar amounts of money. That's just how it is. If you don't like it, prepare to exit. Screenshots shared with Business Insider show he recently received only $167 from a ride in which the passenger paid $350. Long rides aren't worth it anymore. I used to love long rides. Another ride that cost the passenger almost $500 gave him only $220. And sometimes he's offered rides where he needs to drive 10 to 20 miles to pick up a customer, only for them to travel a mile or two. That would suck. Sometimes I'm okay with this. If I know it's gonna put me in a better area, I'll just take the loss. I'm not gonna assume that the area that the drop off was in was busier than where he was currently. I depend mostly on tips now, and I work a specific area where I get the most tips on most of the rides because I conversate with passengers. It threw me off. It's not a word, but I'm not judging. Michael said, adding that he kept 3 dash cams in his car in case of any bad reports. I have 2 dash cams, one inside, one for the front. I assume if someone hits me in the back, the front hopefully is enough to determine that I wasn't reversing and it's not my fault. When you're doing dash cam shopping, be aware that most sensors are the same. They're bought from the same company, and it's just the features of the dash cam that change. So if you get a cheap dash cam, it probably has the same camera sensor as the expensive one. And I made a mistake and I got the most expensive one. Huge mistake. But it's okay. Tax return shared with BI shows Michael made 80 grand in gross earnings from Uber in 2021, which was reduced to $20,600 after expenses and commissions. So this is where I'm gonna call a little bit of bullshit. And let me finish this paragraph. In 2020, he made $34,000 from Uber since he took a few months off. Though he lost $1,000 on net for Lyft, he took home $600 but had gross earnings of over $3,300. If you've never done your taxes, or if you never actually paid attention to your taxes, and I can't blame Business Insider here, but there's a lot of misconception here, and I want to clear it up, and I'm going to need my calculator. So they say he made $1,100, right? Let me pull up proof. Average driven per mile by rideshare drivers. What's that app called? Gridwise. So Gridwise has a report that shows how much drivers are making per mile, right? And this is the graph. So I did the math on this already. I added all these months up, and it's about 80 cents. We're gonna call it 80 cents per mile. That's why I say the average driver makes 80 cents per mile. Here it is. Zoom in a little bit so you can see it, right? So when you average all that, it's about 80 cents per mile. So we're bringing the calculator back up. So that means if we multiply 80 cents by $110,000, that's going to show us how many miles on average a driver has to drive in order to make $110,000. So multiply by point. So he would have to drive 88,000 miles in order to make 110,000 miles at the average rate. So let's assume he drove 88,000 miles in 2022, right? So now we need to look at what is the standard mileage deduction for 2022. So the standard mileage deduction is 62.5 cents per mile. It's pretty much what the government allows you to write off on your income, so you don't have to pay taxes for that, right? So then when we multiply 88,000 miles by 0.625 cents, that number that we're going to see is how much he's allowed to subtract from his income. So he's allowed to subtract $55,000 from his income. So that means he won't be taxed on $55,000. Now, a percentage of that is going to be expenses related. He did have like if he had to replace an engine, that's still not more than a 10 grand thing, but $55,000. So we're going to go here, right? We're going to say minus 110. It's going to give us a negative number, but you just make it non. So he only has to pay taxes on $55,000. So that already lowers like the part of rideshare that is important is the tax write-off. We make tax-free dollars. So all right, I'm struggling to explain this. I'm gonna use my spreadsheet. So my per mile expenses right now so far this month is 16 cents, right? So for 2024, I think the standard mileage deduction is 67 cents. So 67 cents per mile, right? So I can write off 67 cents per mile no matter what. That's just the standard mileage deduction. If I subtract my actual per mile expense, that gives me 51 cents, right? So for every mile I drive based off of my expense ratio versus the standard mileage deduction, I make 51 cents in tax-free money. Now, when I do my taxes, it's gonna show that I only made $55,000, but that's not like the whole truth, right? And I actually can figure out, so let's multiply this by 110. No, sorry, need to multiply it. Oh yeah, by the, well, let me think by the 110 by the amount. Yeah, so 110. So that's how much money he made that's not getting taxed. If his expenses were my ratio. So like if I drove as much as he drove and my expense ratio was what my current expense ratio is $56,000 out of the $110,000 would be tax-free money. You don't pay taxes on that. And that's where rideshare drivers really make their money, off of the standard miles deduction. That's why it's really important to keep your costs as low as possible, drive the cheapest car possible to make the most money possible, because the tax-free money is where we make our money. But on our taxes, it's going to show that we made like $55,000, and then we have to pay taxes on that amount of money. So it's misleading for Business Insider, and I don't blame them. They're probably not, whoever wrote this is probably not a driver. It's misleading to say he only took home 14,000 because about half of the money he actually made is tax-free, and it's not going to show up on your income report, which is why some drivers struggle to get loans, because our income shows that it's a lot lower than it actually is, which is why I qualify for very cheap health insurance, because it shows me not making a lot of money because of the standard miles deduction. Now, the standard miles deduction, when they create that average, it's also based off of semi trucks, the average cost to operate a semi truck, the average cost for construction workers to operate the car, and we're at the bottom of that spectrum. So we're benefiting from that standard miles deduction, which is why I'm a little afraid of the next story. The next story is Biden administration to unveil contractor rule that could upend gig economy, because it could go well and it could go bad. If they take away the standard miles deduction, I strongly believe being a rideshare driver will no longer be worth it unless it comes with something else that will change the pay gap. And I think that they are doing this, or want to do this, in order to get more taxes. If there's no standard mile deduction, then the government can make more money off of taxes. And with gig work exploding the way it has, I can see that perspective. But this is all conjecture. We don't know what will happen. And we're going to read the story, and then I'm going to tell you what I think we should be doing in the face of this legislation. We're going to also view different viewpoints.